The thunderous roar of gunfire echoed through Timber Creek as Sophia Calloway clutched her bleeding brother in her arms, tears streaming down her dirt-smeared face. She had never imagined that her 22nd birthday would end with bullets and blood, but the Dakota Territory of 1876 cared little for celebration or sentiment. "Hold on, Thomas," she whispered, pressing her shawl against the wound in his chest. The stage coach that had brought them west lay overturned behind them, the driver and 2 other passengers already dead. The bandits had taken everything: their money, their luggage, even the letters of introduction to the rancher who had promised Thomas work. "Sophia," Thomas gasped, his face ashen. "You need to run. They'll be back." "I'm not leaving you," she insisted, though she knew with sinking certainty that her brother's life was slipping away with each labored breath. The setting sun cast long shadows across the prairie, and nightfall in this wilderness meant certain death for a woman alone. As the last light faded from Thomas's eyes, Sophia felt something break inside her. She was alone in a savage land, miles from the nearest town, with nothing but the clothes on her back and her brother's corpse beside her. The sound of approaching hoofbeats sent a jolt of terror through her body. She scrambled to her feet, looking desperately for somewhere to hide, but the open prairie offered no refuge. As she prepared to run, a lone rider appeared on the horizon, silhouetted against the dying light. Preston McCoy had been tracking the Blackwater gang for 3 days. The notorious outlaws had robbed 2 homesteads and killed a family near his ranch, and as the newly appointed deputy of Timber Creek, he had sworn to bring them to justice. The trail had led him to the overturned stagecoach, and the sight of a woman standing alone amid the carnage made him spur his horse faster. As he drew closer, he could see her more clearly, tall and slender, with hair the color of maple syrup falling in tangled waves around her shoulders. Her dress, once a pretty blue, was now stained with blood and dust, but it was her eyes that caught his attention, wide with fear yet burning with a fierce determination. "Madam," he called, slowing his horse and raising his empty hands to show he meant no harm. "I'm Deputy Preston McCoy." "Are you hurt?" Sophia stared at the approaching stranger with wary eyes. He was tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered and lean-hipped, with a weathered face that spoke of years under the harsh prairie sun. Dark hair curled beneath his hat, and his eyes, sharp and blue as a mountain lake, assessed her with concern. "They killed my brother," she said, her voice breaking. "The stagecoach was attacked. They took everything." Preston dismounted, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the ground. He approached slowly, like one might a spooked horse. "The Blackwater gang," he muttered, kneeling beside the dead young man. "I've been tracking them. I'm sorry, madam. What's your name?" "Sophia Calloway. My brother was Thomas. We were headed to the Clayton Ranch. He had a position waiting." Preston nodded grimly. "Clayton's place is 30 miles east. There's no way you can make it on foot, especially with night coming on." He glanced at the darkening sky. "My ranch is about 10 miles from here. You can stay there tonight, and tomorrow I'll take you into town." Sophia hesitated. Going with a stranger, even one with a deputy's badge, went against everything she'd been taught. But the alternative was almost certain death from exposure or at the hands of the returning bandits. "We can't leave him here," she said, looking at Thomas. Preston's face softened. "We'll give him a proper burial, I promise." With gentle efficiency, Preston wrapped Thomas's body in a blanket from his saddlebag and laid him across the front of his saddle. Then he helped Sophia mount behind him, her arms reluctantly circling his waist as they set off across the prairie. The McCoy ranch was modest, but well kept, a sturdy 2-story house with a wide porch, a large barn, and several outbuildings. As they approached, an older woman emerged from the house, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Preston." I was starting to worry. She stopped short at the sight of the blanket-wrapped body and the bedraggled young woman. "Oh, dear Lord. Ma, this is Miss Calloway. Her stagecoach was attacked by the Blackwater gang, her brother." He nodded toward the body. "We need to prepare him for burial, and Miss Calloway needs a place to stay." Martha McCoy's weathered face creased with sympathy. "Of course. Come inside, child. Let's get you cleaned up." The next few hours passed in a blur for Sophia. Martha drew her a bath and provided a clean nightgown and robe while her travel-stained clothes were washed. The older woman fed her a simple but hearty stew and cornbread, then showed her to a small bedroom that had once belonged to Preston's sister. "Get some rest, dear," Martha said, patting Sophia's hand. "Things will look clearer in the morning." But as Sophia lay in the unfamiliar bed, sleep wouldn't come. Her mind replayed the attack over and over, the sound of gunfire, the horses screaming, Thomas's blood soaking through her hands. She had come west with such hope, leaving behind the empty life that had awaited her in Boston after her parents' deaths. Now she had nothing, no family, no prospects, not even a change of clothes. Unable to bear the confines of the room any longer, Sophia wrapped the borrowed robe around herself and made her way downstairs. The house was quiet except for the ticking of a clock in the parlor. Through the window, she could see a light in the barn. Drawn by curiosity and the need for distraction, Sophia slipped outside. The night air was cool against her skin, the vast sky ablaze with more stars than she had ever seen in Boston. As she approached the barn, she could hear the soft murmur of a voice. Preston knelt beside a freshly made pine coffin, his hat beside him on the ground. He was speaking quietly, and it took Sophia a moment to realize he was praying over her brother's body. The simple kindness of the gesture made her throat tighten with tears. She must have made a sound, for Preston looked up suddenly, his expression softening when he saw her. "Miss Calloway, I'm sorry if I woke you." "You didn't," she said, stepping closer. "I couldn't sleep." Preston nodded in understanding. "I was just—" "Well, I thought your brother deserved some words said over him. I'm no preacher, but—" "Thank you," Sophia whispered, kneeling beside him. "He would have appreciated it. Thomas always believed in the goodness of people. That's why he wanted to come west. He thought people could start fresh here, be judged by their character rather than their past or their family name. Sounds like a good man. He was the best of men, my only family." The last word caught in her throat. "I don't know what I'm going to do now." Preston was quiet for a long moment. "Tomorrow we'll bury him proper with a marker and everything, then I need to continue tracking those outlaws, but my ma would welcome the company if you wanted to stay here while you figure things out." The offer was unexpected and generous. "I couldn't impose, it's no imposition. Ma's been lonely since my sister married and moved to California, and this territory is no place for a woman alone without resources." Sophia bristled slightly at that. "I'm not helpless, Mr. McCoy. I may be from Boston, but I'm not some fragile flower that wilts at the first sign of difficulty." A small smile played at the corners of Preston's mouth. "I didn't mean to suggest you were, Miss Calloway, but even the sturdiest people need help sometimes. That's part of being human." The simple wisdom of his words disarmed her. "I suppose you're right," she conceded, "and I am grateful for your help and your mother's kindness." "Then it's settled. You'll stay until you decide what comes next." Preston stood, offering his hand to help her up. When she took it, she was surprised by the warmth and strength of his calloused fingers. "Now, you should try to get some rest. Tomorrow will be a difficult day." The next morning, they buried Thomas on a gentle rise overlooking a creek that ran through the McCoy property. Preston had fashioned a simple wooden cross with Thomas's name and the date carved into it. Martha had picked wildflowers to place on the grave, and Sophia read a passage from the small Bible she had carried in her pocket, the only possession the bandits hadn't taken. After the burial, Preston prepared to leave. "I'll be gone for a few days, tracking those men," he told Sophia as he saddled his horse. "Ma will look after you." "Be careful," Sophia said, surprising herself with her concern for this man she barely knew. Those men. They shot without warning or mercy. Preston's eyes hardened. "I know they're kind. Don't worry about me, Miss Calloway." "Sophia," she said suddenly. "Please call me Sophia." A smile softened his stern features. "Sophia then, and I'm Preston." He mounted his horse with easy grace. "I'll be back as soon as I can." The days passed slowly during Preston's absence. Sophia helped Martha with the household chores, grateful to have something to occupy her hands and mind. She learned that the McCoys had come to the Dakota Territory 15 years earlier, when Preston was just 12. His father had died of a fever 5 years ago, leaving Preston to run the ranch with the help of 2 hired hands who lived in a bunkhouse near the barn. "Preston's a good man," Martha told Sophia as they hung laundry on the line. "Works himself too hard, though." taking on this deputy position on top of the ranch. I worry about him." "Why did he become a deputy?" Sophia asked, pinning a sheet against the prairie wind. Martha sighed. "After his pa died, lawlessness got worse around here. The railroad brought opportunities, but also those looking to profit off others' hard work. When the sheriff asked for deputies, Preston volunteered, said someone had to stand for what's right." On the fourth day, Sophia was in the kitchen helping Martha make bread when they heard hoofbeats approaching. Martha peered out the window and gasped, "It's Preston, but he's hurt." They rushed outside to find Preston slumped in his saddle, his shirt dark with blood. With the help of one of the ranch hands who came running from the fields, they got him into the house and onto his bed. "What happened?" Martha demanded as she cut away his shirt to reveal a nasty bullet wound in his shoulder. Preston grimaced. "Caught up to them near the territorial line. There was a shootout. I got one of them, but the others got away." His eyes found Sophia's worried face. "I'm sorry, Sophia, I failed. You're alive. That's what matters," she said firmly, though her heart ached at the thought of her brother's killers escaping justice. For the next week, Sophia helped Martha tend to Preston's wound. The bullet had gone clean through, but infection was always a risk. When fever set in on the second night, Sophia sat by his bedside, bathing his face with cool water while he tossed and muttered in delirium. "Don't go, Pa," he pleaded at one point, his hand clutching at the air. "I'm not ready." "Shh," Sophia soothed, holding his searching hand. "It's all right, you're not alone." His fingers tightened around hers. "Sophia," he murmured, though his eyes remained closed. Pretty Sophia with sad eyes. Her heart gave a peculiar flutter at his words, and she told herself it was merely concern for his condition. By the third day, the fever broke, and Preston began to improve. Sophia continued to help with his care, bringing him broth and helping him sit up to eat as his strength slowly returned. "You're a good nurse," he told her one afternoon as she changed the bandage on his shoulder. "Gentle hands. My mother was often ill," Sophia explained, trying to ignore the warmth that spread through her at his praise. "I learned to care for her." Preston watched her face as she worked. "You miss them, your family." "Every day," she admitted, "but Thomas's death, it's different. We were going to build a new life here together." "What kind of life were you hoping for?" Sophia sat back, considering the question. "A meaningful one, I suppose. In Boston, our lives were prescribed. As a woman of good family but modest means, I was expected to make a suitable marriage and manage a household. Thomas was to work in our uncle's law office, regardless of his own interests." "And what are your interests, Sophia Calloway?" Preston asked, his blue eyes intent on her face. The question took her by surprise. Few people had ever asked what she wanted. "I love books," she said after a moment. "I used to dream of opening a small bookshop or perhaps teaching. Thomas said the new settlements out west were desperate for educated people." Preston nodded. He wasn't wrong. "The nearest school is 20 miles from here, and most children get little education beyond what their parents can provide." A small spark of possibility kindled in Sophia's chest, but she quickly tamped it down. "It doesn't matter now. Those dreams died with Thomas." "Why?" Preston asked simply. Sophia stared at him. "Because I have nothing. No money, no connections, no." "You have skills," Preston interrupted, "and determination. I've seen how hard you work alongside my mother. You're smart and well-educated. Those things have value out here." His faith in her capabilities warmed something inside Sophia that had been cold since Thomas's death. "Perhaps," she allowed, "but for now, I should focus on helping you recover and finding a way to repay your mother's kindness." As Preston regained his strength over the following weeks, a routine developed at the McCoy ranch. Sophia helped Martha with the household tasks during the day and often sat with Preston in the evenings, reading aloud from one of the few books in the house or simply talking. She learned that behind his quiet exterior was a thoughtful mind and unexpected humor. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the prairie gold, Preston said, "The town council is meeting next week to discuss hiring a teacher for the fall term." Sophia's heart quickened. "Oh, I thought you might be interested." He looked at her sideways. "The pay isn't much, but they provide a small house behind the schoolhouse for the teacher to live in. You think they would consider me?" Sophia couldn't keep the hope from her voice. "You're certainly qualified." And we need someone who can handle themselves in a frontier town. I've seen your strength, Sophia. You didn't break when many would have. His assessment made her both proud and oddly self-conscious. I would like to apply if you think it appropriate. Preston smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. I'll take you into town next week. You can meet some folks, see the place for yourself. Timber Creek was a small but growing settlement, a main street with a general store, saloon, hotel, church, and a few other businesses, surrounded by scattered houses and small farms. The newly built schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a simple one-room structure with a bell tower and a small cottage behind it. As Preston helped Sophia down from the wagon in front of the general store, curious glances followed them. A tall, silver-haired man in a well-worn suit approached. Deputy McCoy, good to see you up and about again. His eyes shifted to Sophia with undisguised interest. Judge Wilson, Preston nodded respectfully. May I introduce Miss Sophia Calloway? Miss Calloway, this is Judge Wilson, who serves as head of our town council. Sophia extended her hand. A pleasure to meet you, Judge Wilson. The pleasure is mine, Miss Calloway. The judge shook her hand, studying her face. McCoy tells me you're interested in our teaching position. Yes, sir. I was educated at the Boston Female Academy and served as a tutor to several families before coming west with my brother. The mention of Thomas still brought a pang, but Sophia kept her voice steady. Boston, eh? Well, we're a far cry from such civilization here, but we're trying to build something worthwhile. Parents hereabouts want their children to have opportunities they never had. The judge gestured toward the hotel. The council's meeting for lunch to discuss town matters. Why don't you join us and tell us about your qualifications? As they walked toward the hotel, Sophia felt a flutter of nerves. Preston, seeming to sense her anxiety, leaned close. Just be yourself, he murmured. These are good people who want the best for their children. The town council consisted of Judge Wilson, the minister, the bank manager, and two prominent ranchers. They asked Sophia about her education, teaching philosophy, and her ability to handle the challenges of frontier life. It won't be easy, the bank manager warned. Some of these children have never had formal schooling. Others only attend when their families don't need them for planting or harvest. You'll have students from 5 to 16 in the same room. And while most folks support the school, there are some who think book learning is a waste of time out here, added one of the ranchers. You'll need to prove its worth. Sophia straightened her spine. Education is never wasted, sir. Even the most practical skills are enhanced by the ability to read, write, and calculate. And beyond that, education opens minds to possibilities. Isn't that what the frontier is about, possibility? Her passionate response seemed to impress the council. After further discussion, Judge Wilson cleared his throat. Well, Miss Calloway, unless someone with more experience applies in the next week, which seems unlikely given our remote location, I believe we'd like to offer you the position. School would start in September, but you could move into the teacher's cottage next month to prepare. Joy and relief flooded through Sophia. Thank you, Judge Wilson, gentlemen. I promise I'll do my very best for your children. As they drove back to the ranch that afternoon, Sophia could barely contain her excitement. I can't believe it. My own school, my own home, it's more than I dared hope for. Preston smiled at her enthusiasm. You'll make a fine teacher, Sophia. Those children are lucky to have you. His praise meant more to her than it should have. Over the weeks of his recovery, Sophia had found herself increasingly drawn to the quiet deputy. His strength wasn't just physical. There was a moral certainty to him, a deep well of compassion beneath his reserved exterior. But she reminded herself that his kindness was simply his nature, not a specific interest in her. I couldn't have done this without you and your mother, she said, suddenly serious. You've both been so generous to a stranger. You stopped being a stranger the first night you sat up with me during the fever, Preston said quietly. You're a friend now, perhaps more than a friend. The words hung in the air between them, laden with unspoken meaning. Sophia's heart beat faster, but before she could respond, they crested a hill and saw smoke rising from the direction of the ranch. Fire! Preston snapped the reins, urging the horses to a gallop. As they drew closer, they could see flames engulfing the barn. Martha and the ranch hands were forming a bucket line from the well, but the fire was spreading quickly toward the house. Preston leaped from the wagon before it fully stopped. "Ma, are you all right?" Martha's face was streaked with soot. "Preston, thank God you're back." "It started in the hayloft, we couldn't stop it." "Did everyone get out, the horses?" "Yes, but they got away," Martha said, her voice shaking. "There's something else." "This wasn't an accident, Preston. There were men here, 3 of them. They were looking for you." Preston's face hardened. "The Blackwater gang. They said they'd be back," Martha continued. "Said to tell you that you should have stayed down when you had the chance." Sophia felt cold fear grip her heart. "They know you wounded one of them. They've come for revenge." Preston turned to her, his eyes intense. "Sophia, I want you and Ma to go into town. Stay at the hotel until I send word it's safe." "And what will you do?" Sophia demanded, already knowing the answer. "My job," he said grimly. "I can't let them terrorize this territory any longer." "Preston, no," Martha protested. "There are 3 of them, and they're killers. And I'm the law in these parts," Preston countered. "I can't run and hide while they burn people's homes and murder innocent travelers." Sophia knew arguing was futile. She had seen the determination that drove him, the uncompromising sense of duty. Instead, she said, "At least wait for help. Send for the sheriff or other deputies." Preston shook his head. "By the time help arrives, they could hit 3 more homesteads. I know these hills better than they do. I can track them, maybe catch them unaware." As they worked to save what they could from the fire, Sophia's mind raced. The thought of Preston facing those killers alone filled her with dread. He was still recovering from his wound, and the odds were heavily against him. That night, after they had salvaged what they could and moved into the bunkhouse, which had been spared from the fire, Sophia found Preston cleaning his rifle on the porch. "When will you go?" she asked, sitting beside him. "At first light. I found their tracks heading south toward the Badlands." Sophia took a deep breath. "I want you to promise me something." Preston looked up, his expression questioning. "Promise me you'll come back." Her voice wavered slightly. "Alive." Something flickered in Preston's eyes, surprise, then a warmth that made her breath catch. "I'll do my best," he said softly. "That's not good enough," Sophia insisted. "I've lost everyone else I care about. I can't." She stopped, realizing what she was revealing. Preston set aside his rifle and turned to face her fully. "Sophia," he said, her name a caress on his lips. "Are you saying you care for me?" The directness of the question flustered her. Of course I care. You and your mother have been so kind, and that's not what I'm asking," Preston said gently, taking her hand. "And I think you know it." Sophia looked down at their joined hands, his tanned and calloused, hers pale and smooth. "It would be foolish of me to develop feelings for a man who seems determined to get himself killed," she said finally. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Probably," he agreed. "Almost as foolish as a rancher and deputy developing feelings for a Boston lady who's about to become the town schoolteacher." Her eyes flew to his face. "Preston, I'm not good with fancy words, Sophia, but these past weeks, having you here, it's like the house finally became a home again. You're brave and kind and stronger than you know, and when I'm with you, I remember there's more to life than duty and hard work." The simple, heartfelt declaration moved her more than any poetic phrases could have. "I care for you too," she admitted softly. "More than I should, perhaps. That's why I'm asking you to be careful, to come back." Preston's hand rose to cup her cheek. "I'll come back," he promised. "And when I do, we'll talk more about these feelings of ours, all right?" Sophia nodded, leaning slightly into his touch. Then, surprising herself with her boldness, she leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to his lips. "For luck," she whispered as she pulled away. Preston looked momentarily stunned, then a slow smile spread across his face. "If that's luck, I reckon I'm the luckiest man in the territory." Dawn came too quickly. Sophia watched from the porch as Preston saddled his horse and checked his weapons one last time. Martha stood beside her, her face drawn with worry. "Take care of each other," Preston told them, embracing his mother and then, more hesitantly, Sophia. "I'll be back as soon as I can." As he rode away, disappearing into the early morning mist, Sophia felt a profound sense of dread. She had already lost so much, how could she bear to lose Preston too? The days that followed were some of the longest of Sophia's life. She and Martha stayed at the ranch rather than going to town, both unwilling to leave in case Preston returned. They worked on clearing the debris from the fire and salvaging what they could from the barn. The ranch hands began constructing a temporary shelter for the animals and rebuilding the barn. On the third night after Preston's departure, a violent storm swept across the prairie. Rain lashed at the windows, and thunder shook the bunkhouse where they had been sleeping since the fire. As lightning illuminated the room, Sophia lay awake, thinking of Preston out in the elements, possibly injured or worse. "He'll be all right," Martha said suddenly from her bed across the room, as if reading Sophia's thoughts. "Preston knows these lands like the back of his hand." "I'm afraid for him," Sophia admitted in the darkness. "Those men are killers." "So was the fever that nearly took him, but you helped pull him through that," Martha reminded her. "My son is stubborn and strong, and now he has something special to come home to." Sophia felt her cheeks warm. "Did he say something to you?" Martha chuckled softly. "He didn't need to. I have eyes, child. I've seen the way he looks at you and the way you look at him when you think no one's watching." "I don't even know if it's possible," Sophia confessed. "We're from such different worlds. Are we?" Martha asked. "I came west as a bride from Philadelphia. My family thought I was throwing my life away to follow my husband to savage lands, but I found a different kind of life here, harder in some ways, but more real, more true." The older woman's words gave Sophia comfort. "Thank you, Martha." "Just promise me one thing," Martha said. "If you decide to care for my son, care for all of him, including his sense of duty and his stubborn determination to do what's right. Those things are as much a part of him as his smile or his hands." "I already do," Sophia whispered. On the fifth day, as Sophia was hanging laundry, she heard Martha call her name with urgency. Running around to the front of the house, she saw a cloud of dust on the horizon, riders approaching. "Get inside," Martha ordered, reaching for the shotgun they kept by the door. Could be those outlaws coming back. Sophia's heart raced as she peered through the window. As the riders drew closer, she could make out 4 horses, 3 with riders, 1 without. The lead rider was slumped forward slightly in the saddle, but something about his silhouette was achingly familiar. "It's Preston," she cried, rushing outside despite Martha's protests. Preston was indeed leading the group, though he was clearly injured, his shirt dark with blood on one side. Behind him rode a sheriff she didn't recognize, leading a horse with a body draped across the saddle. The third rider was handcuffed, his face a mask of sullen hatred. Preston straightened as he saw Sophia running toward him, a flicker of relief crossing his pain-etched features. When she reached him, he all but fell into her arms as he dismounted. "You're hurt," she gasped, supporting him as best she could. "Not too bad," he grimaced. "Got them, though." The sheriff dismounted, nodding to Sophia and Martha. "Sheriff Burke from Fort Pierre," he introduced himself. "Found your deputy here tracking these fellas through the Badlands. Caught up with them just as they were about to ambush a freight wagon. This one's dead," he gestured to the body, "and this one will hang. The third one, your deputy already wounded in your barn fight. He bled out before we could get him to a doctor." "The Blackwater gang won't trouble anyone else," Preston said with grim satisfaction, though his voice was weak. "Let's get you inside," Sophia insisted, worry outweighing her relief at his return. While Sheriff Burke took the prisoner into town, Sophia and Martha tended to Preston's wounds. He had been shot in the side, the bullet grazing his ribs without penetrating deeply. The main concerns were blood loss and infection. "You promised to come back alive," Sophia scolded as she cleaned the wound. "You didn't specify barely alive." Preston managed a weak smile. "Still breathing, aren't I?" "Barely," she retorted, but her hands were gentle as they wrapped bandages around his torso. That night, after Martha had gone to sleep, Sophia sat by Preston's bedside, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. The fear she had lived with during his absence had crystallized something within her, a recognition of how deeply she had come to care for this man and the life he represented. Preston stirred, his eyes opening to find her watching him. "You should rest," he murmured. "I was too afraid you wouldn't be here when I woke," she admitted. He reached for her hand, his grip warm and reassuring despite his weakness. "I meant what I said before I left, Sophia. There's something here between us, something worth exploring." I meant what I said too, she whispered. I care for you, Preston. These past weeks have shown me a different kind of life, one with purpose and meaning beyond social expectations. You've shown me that. Preston's thumb traced circles on her palm. Does that mean you might consider staying even after you start teaching? Not just in Timber Creek, but here, with me. The question held so much more than the simple words conveyed. Sophia thought of the life she had planned in Boston, the security and predictability that had seemed so stifling. Then she thought of the wide, open skies of Dakota Territory, the challenge of building something from nothing, and this man who embodied the best qualities of the frontier: strength, integrity, and an unwavering sense of purpose. Yes, she said simply. If you're asking what I think you're asking. A slow smile spread across Preston's face. I'm asking if you might someday consider becoming Mrs. Preston McCoy. Not right away, I know we need time to truly know each other, but someday. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes, not of sorrow, but of an unexpected joy. Someday doesn't sound too far away to me, she said softly. By September, several significant changes had occurred in Sophia's life. The teacher's cottage behind the schoolhouse had been repaired and furnished, and she had moved in 2 weeks before the school term was to begin. The town had rallied around their new teacher, donating books, slates, and other supplies for the school. Preston had recovered from his wounds and had been commended by the territorial governor for bringing down the notorious Blackwater gang. The reward money had gone toward rebuilding the McCoy barn, which was now nearly complete. Most importantly, Sophia and Preston had announced their engagement, with a wedding planned for the following spring. Martha had embraced Sophia as the daughter she had always wanted, and the women had begun planning both the wedding and the renovations needed to make the ranch house comfortable for a growing family. On the evening before the first day of school, Preston rode into town to find Sophia standing on a ladder outside the schoolhouse, hanging a new bell in the tower. Should you be up there? He called, dismounting quickly. That doesn't look very stable. Sophia looked down, her face flushed with exertion and excitement. I'm perfectly fine. The children deserve a proper bell for their school. Preston moved to steady the ladder anyway. Always thinking of others, he said with affectionate exasperation. Come down now, please. I brought you something. Intrigued, Sophia descended and accepted the small package he offered. Unwrapping it, she found a beautiful brass bell for her desk, smaller than the school bell but exquisitely crafted, with her initials engraved on the handle. Preston, it's lovely, she breathed, ringing it experimentally. The clear, bright tone made her smile. Ordered it special from back east, he explained, clearly pleased by her reaction. Thought you should have something fine for your first teaching position. Sophia stood on tiptoe to kiss him, no longer self-conscious about showing affection. Thank you, it's perfect. They walked hand in hand toward her cottage, the setting sun painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber. Are you nervous about tomorrow? Preston asked. A little, Sophia admitted. What if the children don't like me? What if I can't teach them properly? You'll be wonderful, Preston assured her. You have passion and patience, both essential for a teacher, and you understand what these children need because you've seen both worlds. His confidence bolstered her own. I've prepared lessons for different age groups, and I've selected books I think will capture their imagination. I want them to see that education isn't just about facts and figures, it's about expanding their horizons. Preston smiled at her enthusiasm. This town doesn't know how lucky it is to have you. As they reached the cottage, Sophia hesitated before inviting him in. Though they were engaged, she was still mindful of propriety, especially as the town's new teacher. Preston seemed to understand. I should head back to the ranch. Ma's expecting me for supper, and I've got an early start tomorrow. Will you come to the school dedication on Sunday? Sophia asked. Judge Wilson is making a speech, and the minister will bless the building. Wouldn't miss it, Preston promised, leaning down to kiss her goodbye. What started as a gentle kiss deepened as Sophia wound her arms around his neck, the weeks of worry and separation making her bold. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing harder. Spring seems very far away, Preston murmured, resting his forehead against hers. Sophia laughed softly. 7 months. We'll manage somehow. As Preston rode away, Sophia watched until he disappeared from sight, marveling at how completely her life had changed in just a few months. From the tragedy of Thomas's death had come unexpected joy and purpose, a new home, a meaningful vocation, and a love she had never anticipated. The next morning, Sophia stood at the schoolhouse door in her best blue dress, welcoming the children of Timber Creek to their first day of school. 27 students of varying ages filed in, some excited, others wary, a few clearly reluctant. "Welcome," she said when they were all seated. "My name is Miss Calloway, and I'm honored to be your teacher. Before we begin with our lessons, I want to tell you why education matters, especially here on the frontier." She moved among the desks, making eye contact with each child. "Some of you might be wondering why you need to learn reading and writing and arithmetic when there are crops to tend and animals to raise. The answer is simple. Knowledge gives you choices. The more you know, the more you can choose your own path in life." A freckle-faced boy near the back raised his hand. "My pa says book learning won't help me run our farm." Sophia nodded, appreciating his honesty. "Books can teach you about new farming methods or how to keep better records of your harvests and expenses. They can help you write to seed companies or negotiate better prices for your crops. Everything you learn here will make you better at whatever you choose to do, whether that's farming, ranching, business, or something else entirely." As the day progressed, Sophia found herself energized by the children's curiosity and their unique perspectives. Even the most reluctant students began to engage when she incorporated stories of the region's history and geography into her lessons. By the time the school day ended, Sophia was exhausted but exhilarated. As she watched the last children leave, calling goodbyes and carrying their new books and slates, she felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where she belonged, helping to shape the future of this frontier community. That Sunday, the entire town gathered for the official dedication of the schoolhouse. Sophia stood proudly beside Judge Wilson as he cut the ribbon across the doorway, her heart swelling as she caught Preston's eye in the crowd. He was watching her with such open admiration that she felt herself blush. After the ceremony, as people mingled and toured the schoolhouse, Preston made his way to her side. "You're a natural," he said quietly. "The children already adore you, and the parents are impressed by how much they've learned in just 1 week." "It feels right," Sophia admitted. "Teaching here, being part of building something important, building a community," Preston nodded. "Just like we're building a life together." The winter months passed quickly, filled with teaching for Sophia and ranch work for Preston. On weekends, they often rode together across the McCoy property, Preston showing Sophia the beauty of the Dakota landscape in all seasons. He taught her to ride properly and to shoot, skills he insisted were essential for frontier life. In turn, Sophia brought new life to the McCoy home, filling it with books and music. She started a lending library in one corner of the schoolhouse, encouraging parents to read with their children. She organized a Christmas pageant that brought the entire community together and began a weekly reading circle for the women of Timber Creek. As spring approached, wedding preparations intensified. The ceremony would take place in the newly completed church, with a celebration afterward at the McCoy Ranch. Sophia had ordered a wedding dress from Chicago, simpler than what she might have worn in Boston, but still elegant with its lace trim and pearl buttons. 2 weeks before the wedding, Preston was called away to help the sheriff pursue a group of horse thieves operating along the territorial border. The night before he left, he and Sophia walked along the creek that ran through his property, their fingers intertwined. "I don't like leaving so close to the wedding," he confessed, "but Sheriff Burke says they've hit 3 ranches already." "I understand," Sophia assured him, though her heart was heavy. "It's who you are, Preston. I wouldn't ask you to change that." He stopped walking to face her, taking both her hands in his. "You know, when I first found you by that stagecoach, covered in your brother's blood but still standing tall, I thought you were the bravest person I'd ever met." Sophia shook her head. "I was terrified." "That's what makes it courage," Preston said softly. "Being afraid but standing your ground anyway. You've been doing that every day since building a new life from nothing, opening your heart again despite your loss." His words touched something deep within her. "We both have," she replied. "It's easier to be brave when you're not alone." Preston pulled her close, his arms strong and secure around her. "You'll never be alone again, Sophia Calloway. That's a promise." The following week brought unseasonably heavy rains, swelling the creeks and making travel difficult. Sophia watched anxiously for Preston's return as the wedding day drew closer, but there was no word from him or the sheriff. 3 days before the wedding, Martha found Sophia staring out the window at the sodden landscape. "He'll be here," the older woman assured her. "Preston has never broken a promise in his life. What if something's happened to him?" Sophia couldn't keep the fear from her voice. "The creeks are flooding, and those horse thieves are dangerous men." Martha put a comforting arm around her shoulders. "We would have heard if there was trouble. The telegraph line to Fort Pierre is still working, despite the rain." But as the day before the wedding dawned with still no sign of Preston, Sophia's anxiety grew. The rain had finally stopped, but the roads were muddy quagmires and the creeks remained dangerously high. By midday, guests from neighboring towns had begun to arrive, staying at the hotel in Timber Creek or with friends in the area. Sophia went through the motions of welcoming them, but her eyes constantly strayed to the horizon, looking for any sign of riders. That evening, as she sat on the porch of the teacher's cottage where she had spent her last night as a single woman, Sophia heard hoofbeats approaching. Her heart leaped as she rushed to her feet, but it was Sheriff Burke who rode up, alone and grim-faced. "Miss Calloway," he said, removing his hat. "I came as soon as I could." Cold dread washed over Sophia. "Where is Preston?" she demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. "There was a confrontation with the horse thieves near the territorial line," the sheriff explained. "We had them cornered, but they managed to cross Eagle Creek before we could apprehend them. Preston went after them despite the high water." "And," Sophia pressed, her hands clenched so tight that her nails bit into her palms. The creek was running faster than it looked. "Preston's horse lost its footing." Sheriff Burke's eyes were sympathetic but direct. "He was swept downstream. We searched for 2 days along the banks, but with the water so high." Sophia felt as if the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. "No," she whispered. "No, he promised he'd come back." "I'm sorry, Miss Calloway. He was a fine deputy and a good man." After the sheriff left, Sophia sat motionless on the porch steps, too numb to cry. The future she had planned, the life she had begun to rebuild, all of it seemed to have been washed away with Preston. Martha arrived shortly after, having received the news from Sheriff Burke. Without a word, she sat beside Sophia and took her hand. "He can't be gone," Sophia said finally, her voice hollow. "Not Preston. He's too strong too," her voice broke. "I know, child," Martha said, her own eyes wet with tears. "I know." The wedding guests were informed, and many came to offer condolences. Judge Wilson announced that a memorial service would be held in place of the wedding, honoring Preston's service to the community and his sacrifice in pursuit of justice. The night before what should have been her wedding day, Sophia couldn't bear to stay in the teacher's cottage, surrounded by well-meaning friends. Instead, she asked to be alone at the McCoy ranch, where she could feel close to Preston. Martha understood and went to stay with a neighbor, leaving Sophia with her grief. As darkness fell, Sophia walked to the creek where she and Preston had often strolled, the rushing water a constant soundtrack to their conversations. Now the creek, swollen with rain, seemed like a cruel reminder of what she had lost. "You promised," she whispered into the darkness, tears finally breaking free. "You promised you'd come back." The sound of a branch breaking behind her made Sophia whirl around, her heart racing. In the dim moonlight, she could make out a figure tall, broad-shouldered, moving with painful slowness. "Who's there?" she called, reaching for the small pistol Preston had insisted she carry. "Sophia." The voice was weak but achingly familiar. For a moment, Sophia thought grief had made her imagine it. Then the figure staggered into a patch of moonlight, and she saw him clearly: Preston, his clothes torn and caked with mud, his face gaunt with exhaustion but unmistakably, impossibly alive. "Preston." She cried, running to him, afraid he would disappear if she didn't reach him quickly enough. "How they said you were swept away." He collapsed into her arms, his weight nearly taking them both to the ground. "I was," he managed, his voice raspy. Creek carried me almost 2 miles downstream before I could grab onto a tree. Been walking, 3 days, trying to get back to you. Sophia helped him toward the house, tears streaming down her face, not of sorrow now, but of overwhelming relief and joy. They told us you were dead, she sobbed. The sheriff searched for 2 days. Couldn't die, Preston whispered, leaning heavily on her, not before our wedding. Once inside, Sophia helped him to his bed and began removing his sodden, filthy clothes. His body was a map of new cuts and bruises, but he was alive, breathing, warm, present. Need to get you to a doctor, she said, her hands shaking as she wrapped him in blankets. Preston caught her wrist. Not going anywhere, he insisted weakly. Not tonight, just need rest and you. Sophia hesitated only briefly before sliding into the bed beside him, fully clothed, needing to feel his heartbeat against hers. Preston's arms encircled her with what little strength he had left. Thought I'd lost you, she whispered into his chest. I was so afraid. Never, he murmured, his voice already fading as exhaustion claimed him. Promised I'd come back. In the morning, Sophia woke to find Preston watching her, his blue eyes clearer though still shadowed with fatigue. The morning sun streamed through the window, illuminating the impossible miracle of his presence. I wasn't dreaming, she said, touching his face reverently. You really came back to me. Always will, he promised. Then with a hint of his usual humor, though I'll admit, this time was closer than I'd like. Sophia sent one of the ranch hands to town with the news of Preston's miraculous return. Within hours, Martha had rushed home, dissolving into tears at the sight of her son. Judge Wilson, the minister, and many townspeople followed, the news spreading like wildfire through the community. The doctor examined Preston and declared that apart from exhaustion, dehydration, and numerous cuts and bruises, he was remarkably unharmed. A few days' rest, plenty of fluids, and you'll be back on your feet, the doctor advised. Though I'd stay away from creeks for a while if I were you, Deputy. As night fell and the visitors departed, Sophia sat beside Preston's bed, unwilling to let him out of her sight. The wedding will have to be postponed, she said, stroking his hand. You need time to recover. Preston shook his head stubbornly. No postponement. I've waited long enough to make you my wife, but you can barely stand, Sophia protested. I can stand long enough to say my vows, Preston insisted. Unless you've changed your mind, Sophia's eyes widened. Changed my mind. Preston McCoy, I thought you were dead yesterday. If anything, I'm more certain than ever that I want to spend every possible day as your wife. A slow smile spread across his face. Then we get married tomorrow as planned. I might not be able to dance with you at the celebration, but I'll be there, saying I do and meaning it with all my heart. And so, on a bright spring morning, Sophia Calloway walked down the aisle of Timber Creek's small church toward the man she had nearly lost. Preston stood at the altar, pale but steady, his eyes never leaving her face as she approached in her Chicago dress. Dearly beloved, the minister began, we are gathered here today to witness a union that even raging waters could not prevent. The ceremony was simple but deeply moving, many eyes in the congregation damp with tears as Preston and Sophia exchanged vows. When they were pronounced husband and wife, the cheer that went up seemed to shake the rafters of the little church. The celebration afterward was moved from the McCoy Ranch to the town square to accommodate Preston's limited strength. He sat in a chair beside Sophia as friends and neighbors offered congratulations and shared food and music. Despite his exhaustion, his eyes shone with happiness as he watched his bride greeting their guests. No regrets, he asked quietly when she returned to his side. Marrying a man who can't even stand for his own wedding party. Sophia leaned down to kiss him, no longer concerned about public displays of affection. My only regret would have been not marrying you at all, she said. Everything else is just details. As evening approached, Preston grew visibly tired, and Sophia insisted on taking him home. They rode in Judge Wilson's comfortable carriage, Preston's head resting on Sophia's shoulder. Not exactly the wedding night I had planned, he murmured apologetically as they reached the ranch. Sophia's cheeks colored slightly, but she smiled. We have all our lives ahead of us, Preston. Tonight, just having you here, alive and beside me, is more than enough. That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of what was now their shared bedroom, Preston took Sophia's hand and placed it over his heart. "When I was in that creek, being swept downstream, unable to find purchase," he said softly, "all I could think about was you. Not dying, not the pain, just that I had promised to come back to you and I couldn't break that promise." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. "I felt so hopeless when they told me you were gone, like everything we'd built, everything we'd planned had been washed away." "Never hopeless," Preston whispered, echoing words he had spoken once before, though in a very different context. "Not while I still breathe beside you." Sophia curled closer to him, marveling at how perfectly they fit together. "I'll hold you to that promise, Preston McCoy. For all the days of our lives." "All the days," he agreed, sealing the vow with a tender kiss. In the years that followed, Preston and Sophia built a life that exceeded even their most optimistic hopes. The McCoy Ranch prospered under their joint management, with Sophia bringing her organizational skills and education to complement Preston's practical knowledge of the land. Sophia continued teaching for several years, eventually training a young woman from Timber Creek to take her place when their first child, a daughter they named Elizabeth Martha, was born. 2 more children followed: Thomas Preston, named for Sophia's brother and his father, and Sarah Jane, who had her mother's love of books and her father's determined spirit. Preston remained a deputy, but took on fewer dangerous assignments as their family grew, focusing instead on making the territory safer through community building and preventive measures. He helped organize a regional association of ranchers and farmers to address common concerns, from water rights to protection against rustlers. The teacher's cottage was converted into Timber Creek's first public library, with Sophia serving as volunteer librarian when her duties at home and the ranch permitted. She started a literary society that became a social hub for the growing settlement, bringing together people from diverse backgrounds to discuss ideas and culture. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Preston surprised Sophia with a trip back east to visit her childhood home in Boston and to show their children the world their mother had come from. While there, Sophia was struck by how foreign the city now seemed: crowded, confining, governed by rigid social rules that no longer made sense to her. "Do you ever regret it?" Preston asked as they stood on the deck of the steamship taking them back west. "Leaving all this behind for a harder life on the frontier?" Sophia looked at their 3 children, sun-browned and sturdy, full of confidence and curiosity about the world. She thought of their home on the prairie, the community they had helped build, the purpose that filled their days. "Never," she said with absolute certainty. "That stagecoach robbery was the worst day of my life. Losing Thomas broke my heart, but it also led me to you, to our family, to a life with real meaning." Preston's arm tightened around her waist. "Sometimes the hardest trails lead to the best views," he said, quoting one of his father's favorite sayings. Sophia rested her head on his shoulder, watching the eastern shoreline recede as they headed home, not to the place of her birth, but to the land and the man who had captured her heart and given her hope when all had seemed lost. "You were right, you know," she said softly. "That day by my brother's grave when you said even the sturdiest people need help sometimes. We've needed each other every step of this journey. And we always will," Preston replied, his voice as certain as the day he had promised to return to her. "Not just for the hard times, but for the joy too. That's what makes a life worth living, having someone to share it with, someone who sees you truly and loves you anyway." As the ship carried them westward toward home, Sophia thought of the frightened, grieving young woman she had been, kneeling beside her brother's body on the blood-soaked prairie. How impossible it would have seemed then that she would find not just safety but profound happiness in this wild, demanding land, that she would build a family, help shape a community, and discover strengths within herself she had never imagined. All because a duty-bound deputy with kind eyes had stopped to help a stranger in need, and in doing so had changed both their lives forever. All because when hope seemed lost, he had promised to stand beside her, breathing courage into her heart with each passing day. And he had kept that promise, through flood and fire, through childbirth and illness, through all the ordinary challenges and extraordinary joys of their shared life. Just as she had kept her promise to him to embrace not just the man but his sense of purpose, his unwavering commitment to doing what was right, even when it was difficult. Together, they had built something that would outlast them, both a family rooted in love and respect, a community founded on education and justice, a legacy of courage in the face of adversity. And in doing so, they had discovered the most profound truth of frontier life, that the greatest adventures weren't found in conquering the land, but in opening one's heart to the possibilities of love, even when circumstances made it seem hopeless. For as Preston had whispered to her in that moment of deepest despair, there was always hope, not in easy promises or fleeting emotions, but in the steady commitment to breathe beside one another through whatever trials life might bring.